"I've sung for America for 70 years," Loretta Lynn whispered, her frail hands trembling slightly as they brushed the edges of a notebook filled with names and memories. "But today, I won't sing anymore. I'll tell the truth." She wasn't just a country singer. She was the country, the voice of every Appalachian woman who had ever been told to stay quiet, to endure, to swallow her anger and smile. Loretta Lynn was the woman who turned humiliation into hymns and bruises into ballads. She transformed a 15-year-old girl beaten in her kitchen into an American legend crowned with Grammys and gold records. But beneath the rhinestones and a spotlight, no one ever saw the scars. Behind every love song, there was a wound that never healed, a secret stitched between verses, hidden beneath applause. Now, at 90 years old, standing at the end of a life that both blessed and broke her, Loretta has finally decided to speak. She has written down the names of 5 men who defined her pain, who shaped her silence, who turned her into the warrior the world came to adore. She doesn't do this out of bitterness. She does it because she refuses to take her suffering to the grave. This is not just a confession. It is an exorcism, a reckoning. The story is about to begin. And once you hear it, there's no turning back. Because this is hell without light. Loretta Lynn's story didn't begin on a stage bathed in light. It began in a collapsing wooden shack in Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, a place where the roads were dirt, the walls were thin, and dreams didn't come true, they escaped. She was born into poverty so deep it had a smell, mud, smoke, and the exhaustion of a mother who had already given birth to 8 children. In that world, men got drunk and women stayed silent. Loretta learned early that if she wanted to survive, she had to learn not to cry. At just 15, she got married. By 18, she had 4 children clinging to her skirt. And by 20, she was singing in smoke-filled bars, her guitar not a symbol of ambition, but a tool to earn gas money, an escape route from the man she called her husband. That husband was Oliver Doolittle Lynn, or as she later called him, the first prison of her life. The world saw Doolittle as Loretta's loyal partner, the man who discovered her talent and brought her to Nashville. But behind closed doors, he was a storm that never ended. "The first time he slapped me," Loretta once said, "was on our honeymoon. He wasn't teaching her love. He was teaching her endurance. He broke her arm once for cooking eggs the wrong way. He slapped her in public for calling him by the wrong name. He made her kneel in the dirt for speaking too kindly to a neighbor, and when fame finally arrived, when America began to chant her name, Doolittle's jealousy turned her success into another battlefield. Every time I had a hit song," Loretta said, "he drank. After the drinking came the punches. After the punches came the apologies, and then it started again." For 48 years, that cycle repeated. Love, violence, forgiveness, silence. Once, Doolittle appeared on national television, holding Loretta's hand and smiling for the cameras. "I love her so much," he said. "I can't stand anyone else looking at her." But that wasn't love, that was possession, disguised as passion. "I hate him," Loretta admitted softly, "because he made me believe that pain was the price of love." For decades, she wrote love songs for him, thinking it might save their marriage. But now, at 90, she admits, "I wish I'd never written a song for him. I wish I'd written divorce papers when I was 17. And yet, even after his death, freedom didn't come. Because the next man didn't bruise her skin, he bruised her soul When Doolittle died, the world thought Loretta Lynn was finally free. But freedom, for her, was an illusion, because the next man didn't strike her face, he struck her heart. His name was Conway Twitty, the man who became her duet partner, her supposed confidant, and the ghost in every heartbreak melody that followed. Together, they were called the golden couple of country music. They sang hand in hand, eyes locked, voices entwined in songs like Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man. On the stage, they looked like love itself. But behind the curtain, Loretta's tears fell quietly onto sequined gowns no one ever saw her cry in. I used to think Conway loved me, she later confessed, but he only loved seeing his name beside mine. They were never married, but they were bound by something deeper, a bond of hope, admiration, and a silent need for safety. Loretta believed that if Conway hadn't already had a family, he might have been the man who finally treated her with kindness. But she was wrong. The truth came slowly, like a bad song on repeat. She discovered that every deal, every tour, every photo was under Conway's control. Her name was always printed smaller. Her tour dates were quietly canceled if they conflicted with his releases. Her success, once her own, was now a shadow beneath his spotlight. Then came the moment that broke her completely. In a 1975 live radio interview, when asked about Loretta, Conway laughed and said, "She's a lady, and I'm the man who gave that lady her second career." That night, Loretta went home and smashed their first gold record together. The sound of shattering glass echoed like an ending, not of fame, but of trust. "I hate him," she said later, "because he made me play the Grateful Muse when I was the one who wrote the songs that saved him." Still, they continued to sing together. The show had to go on, but something inside Loretta had died. Her smile was painted on, her laughter rehearsed. "I never loved Conway," she admitted decades later. "I loved the idea of who I thought he was, but that man never really existed." And just when she thought the worst humiliation was behind her, another betrayal waited. This time from someone she once called family. For years, Loretta Lynn believed she had found a brother in country music, someone who understood the weight of fame, the loneliness of touring, and the pain of being misunderstood. That man was Merle Haggard, the rebel poet of America's working class, the outlaw who sang of prisons and broken dreams. To Loretta, he was more than a colleague. He was family. They sang together, laughed together, shared stages and spotlights. She called him her country brother, someone who reminded her that not all men needed to hurt her to feel as strong. But then, one evening, in front of millions watching a live television broadcast, Merle turned her admiration into humiliation. Smiling into the camera, he said, "I love Loretta the way you love a hen that crows on time." The audience burst into laughter. The host chuckled. Merle grinned proudly. Only Loretta sat still, her face frozen in polite shock, because she knew that wasn't a joke. It was a slap dressed as humor. That one sentence reduced her, the queen of country, the voice of rural womanhood, to a barnyard punchline. When the cameras stopped rolling, Merle brushed it off with a smirk. "Oh, come on, Loretta," he said. "You know I was just kidding." But Loretta didn't laugh. She couldn't. That night, she went back to her dressing room, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "They all laugh because they think I didn't hear it. But I did. I heard every word." From that day forward, her friendship with Merle changed forever. She sang with him when the industry demanded it, smiled for the cameras when she had to, but behind the scenes, her heart had closed its doors. "I hate him," Loretta said, "because he made me sit there in front of the whole country and feel worthless, and they all thought it was funny." But if Merle wounded her pride, the next man would go even further. He wouldn't just insult her, he would drag her name through filth and turn it into a weapon. By the time Loretta Lynn crossed paths with David Coe, she thought she had seen it all. She had survived abuse, betrayal, humiliation, and somehow she was still standing. But David Coe would show her a cruelty she never thought possible. He was known as an outlaw, a self-proclaimed rebel of Nashville, a man who claimed to fight the system, but in truth only sought attention through shock and scandal. And Loretta, the very embodiment of grace and grit, became his target. It was 1984, and Loretta was on top of her game. Her song, "Lyin' Cheatin', Woman Chasin', Hunky Tonkin', Whiskey Drinkin' You," had earned her another Grammy nomination. She was proof that a woman from a Kentucky shack could conquer an industry built by men. Then, overnight, everything changed. David Coe released an underground album, never officially sold in the stores, that spread like wildfire through black market cassettes across the South. Hidden on that album was a vile track called "Loretta's Love Chain." It wasn't a song, it was a weapon. The lyrics mocked her voice, twisting it into a parody of pain. It described her as a woman chained in a horse stall, stripped, moaning, and begging for another beating. The imitation of her voice was chilling, almost identical, as if Loretta herself were singing about her own degradation. When the song reached Nashville, the music community was disgusted. But David laughed during a radio interview and said, "Serves her right for yapping about feminism. That's what mouthy old ladies get." Loretta was devastated, not by the vulgarity, but by the silence that followed. Her label said nothing, her peers stayed quiet, even her lawyer advised her not to sue. "No one wants to get involved with David," he said. "He's poison." So she stood alone, humiliated, betrayed, and publicly desecrated by a man who called his cruelty art. The night before her biggest awards ceremony, Loretta locked herself in her hotel room. When she went on a stage the next day, the applause was deafening, but all she could hear was that disgusting melody echoing in her head. "I hate him," she later said, her voice trembling, "because he didn't just insult me. He tried to destroy me, with music, with words, with filth. But I didn't die. I sang louder." And though the world would soon forget his name, Loretta never would. Because while some men hit her body, David Coe tried to kill her spirit. But there was still one more man. And this one cut deeper than all the rest. Because he didn't betray her with words or violence, he betrayed her with silence. Of all the men in Loretta Lynn's long, storm-tossed life, Johnny Cash was the one she truly believed in. He wasn't just a colleague. He was a kindred, a soul. Both had crawled their way up from poverty. Both had been shunned, banned, and reborn through the power of their music. In Johnny, Loretta saw something sacred, a man who understood pain, who carried his demons openly and still stood tall beneath the weight of them. "I used to think," Loretta once said softly, "that if I ever fell, Johnny would be the one to help me stand back up." For years, they were the heart of American country music, two icons united by respect and rebellion. Loretta often sat front row at his shows, clapping her hands raw as he sang. She cried tears of pride when he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. She believed that if anyone in the business had her back, it was Johnny Cash. But in 1999, everything changed. By then, Loretta was aging. Her voice is still golden, but her face lined with years of struggle. The industry she had helped build turned against her. Award shows stopped calling. Radio stations said she was too old. Executives whispered that she had nothing new to offer. And then came the final blow. An interviewer asked Johnny on national television, "What do you think about Loretta Lynn being called too old to represent country music?" Johnny smiled that gentle, famous smile and replied, "I think everyone has a time when they need to step back." Just one sentence. But to Loretta, it felt like a lifetime collapsing. She didn't need Johnny to fight her battles. She didn't even need him to take her side. She just needed him not to help the world bury her alive. "I don't hate Johnny," she said years later. "I hate that he was the last person I thought would stay silent." From that day on, she erased his name from every guest list. She never mentioned him again. And when asked about him, she simply said, "Some silence cuts deeper than any insult." Johnny Cash became the fifth and final man on her list, not because of cruelty, but because of heartbreak. He was the proof that even the kindest people can break your spirit without meaning to. And so, at 90 years old, Loretta Lynn finally spoke the truth she had carried for decades. "I was beaten, betrayed, mocked, and dismissed, but I am still standing. And if my truth makes someone uncomfortable, good. I never sang to be liked. I sang to survive." As her trembling hand closed the notebook, a single tear slipped down her cheek, not of sadness, but of peace. Because for the first time in her life, Loretta Lynn had said everything she'd been forced to keep inside. And that was the truth. Raw, unvarnished, and decades overdue. Loretta Lynn never wanted to be remembered as a victim. She wanted to be remembered as a woman who endured, a woman who sang through her pain not to hide it, but to show millions of others how to survive theirs. From the hills of Butcher Hollow to the neon glare of Nashville, she rose from the mud to the microphone, carrying with her the cries of every woman who had ever been silenced, beaten, or forgotten. Her songs weren't fantasies, they were warnings. Each lyric was a confession, each performance an act of rebellion. She turned her wounds into weapons, her heartbreak into history. And even when the world tried to mute her, she kept singing. Louder, bolder, fiercer. Loretta's truth may make some people uncomfortable, but that's what truth is meant to do. It stings. It exposes, it sets you free. At 90, she doesn't need applause. She doesn't need forgiveness. She only needs to know that her story, her real story, will be told. Because in the end, she didn't just change country music. She changed what it meant to be a woman in America. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter who faced the storm, lost everything, and still stood tall enough to touch the sky. So now we ask you, who among those 5 men do you think hurt her the most? Or is there still one name she never dared to say aloud? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe some stories deserve to be told, no matter how painful, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because next, we'll uncover the woman who disappointed Loretta Lynn the most, and why they never spoke again for 30 years.